Good afternoon and welcome to the Tourism 2030 Strategy webinar. My name is Raquel Boyd and I'm your facilitator for today's session. Before we begin the formalities of the day, I'd like to hand over to Lynn Ashpole, the Assistant General Manager, Policy and Coordination for Austrade, who's going to make some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Raquel. Hello, everybody. I'm Lynn Ashpole, and I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today for this Tourism 2030 webinar consultation. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country, which is slightly unusual given we're doing a webinar, but as I'm in Sydney, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are participating in the webinar today. Austrade is really pleased to be leading the development of the Tourism 2030 strategy in partnership with Tourism Australia and our state and territory colleagues. The strategy, though, will also obviously be driven by industry, and it's really critical that we hear your ideas and priorities. Very briefly, some great work's already taken place. Some of you may be aware of the work of the Beyond Tourism 2020 Steering Committee, who reported to government in December last year. The committee's report is a really good foundation for this new strategy, but we're also doing a lot more consultation, of which this webinar is a very important part, and looking for new ideas and for more feedback from industry. We've done a number of face-to-face workshops. They started in September. They've been going on all around the country and they'll wrap up by the middle of November. But this webinar is a really important part of that process for people who haven't been able to physically come along to those workshops. It's obviously going to be a little bit different to doing a face-to-face workshop, but Raquel and KJA consultants who are leading the webinar today have developed a really engaging process. I obviously encourage you all to make the most of today's session by adding your voice and your ideas to the development of this new strategy for the next decade. KJA have designed this strategy to get as much input from you as possible, so please don't be shy at all with your contributions. And with that, I will hand back to Raquel.
Thank you, Lynn. So as I mentioned, I will be your facilitator for today. And before we get into having a look at what we'll be covering in today's session, I would like to just reflect, as Lynn has commented, that this is a national webinar. So we have attendees who are now participating inside the webinar from all over Australia. We have all states and territories represented. We also have a few international participants. So wherever you are in the world, I hope it isn't too early or too late for you, but we welcome you to this webinar. As we also know, we have many people in regional areas and also remote locations. And we understand that the digital connectivity may be different or challenging in different parts of the nation. So to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to participate through this process, we will make sure that we take it a bit slow and enable the technology to be able to get to all parts so that you have the ability to be providing your input in a timely way through this process. That may mean that we take some quiet time just to enable everybody on the webinar to have the streaming come to them to give them the information and the actions. Now, our objectives for this session are now displaying on the screen. And essentially what this is a consultation webinar. So we are enabling you to provide input to the development of the strategy for the tourism industry to 2030. In today's webinar, we will be giving you the opportunity to articulate your aspirations for the industry. We're also going to give the opportunity to identify and talk to us about challenges and opportunities that you see coming along on that journey to 2030. You'll get to look at some priority areas and tell us about those priorities. And you'll get to share your on-the-ground insights with us through this consultation process. Before we get into the activities, just a little bit of housekeeping first. On this webinar, the audio is muted. So that means you're not able to provide audio input to the webinar. There are, however, other ways for you to do that. You'll see on the screen there is an icon on the toolbar that you should be able to see in your screen. Now, if you are on a laptop or PC, it's likely that this toolbar is appearing to the right of your screen. If you're viewing from a mobile device, it's likely appearing at the top or the bottom of your screen. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can do it two ways. You can raise your hand by clicking the hand icon, or you can click on the question mark icon and you can type in a question to that area and again have that answered. Now, two of my colleagues, Paula and Alice, both from KJA, are online now. So if you do raise your hand or submit a question, you would receive a response from either Paula or Alice. So keep an eye on the chat number that's in that question mark. Keep an eye on the hand, because if you have asked a question, we will get to it and we will provide you an answer, and it will likely be coming to you from Paula or Alice. Now, as you've read in the material that you've received for the webinar, we're also going to be using Poll Everywhere as a tool to capture your information today. So if you haven't yet gone into the Poll Everywhere tool, I suggest that now is a good time to do that. The URL is here on the screen. It is also in the emails that you have received for the webinar today. You may like to open it as another window in your browser, or you may like to open it on the browser on your smartphone. Either way, you can do that to provide your input in each of the activities as we proceed. So we will have four main activities in the webinar today. The first will be looking into the future. The second will be looking at the opportunities and challenges. The third activity will be prioritizing focus areas. And then our final activity will be looking at game changers. I'd like to plant a seed for you now as we proceed through the webinar. And that is to put in the back of your mind, game changers. What might that be for the tourism industry of 2030? What could be that silver bullet, that magic thing that could actually make a significant difference to enabling a successful industry in 2030? So let that tick away in the back of your mind. And when we come to this final activity, we'll ask you to share with us what you believe that game changer could be. And then finally, we will hear again from Lynn for closing remarks and the next steps in this process. So let's start by looking into the future. The first question that we're going to pose to you today is this: how would you describe the successful Australian tourism industry of 2030? I'd like you to think about that. Think about how you would characterize the industry. How would you describe the successful elements of that? You might like to think about what the industry awards might sound like. What are people saying when they're receiving their awards? How are they describing the industry that they're participating in 2030? Now we're going to go to Poll Everywhere to be able to capture your inputs. I invite you to go to either your smartphone or the other browser window that you have open with Poll Everywhere, and invite you to enter into that screen the words that you believe would best describe the successful industry of 2030. And let's watch those as they come up on the screen. There are lots of entries coming in now. Keep them coming. In this activity, you can enter as many descriptors as you feel are necessary. So just a word or a short phrase would be wonderful input to this activity. Now, what we're seeing here is a word cloud. What a word cloud does is it looks at the frequency of the words that are being entered into this screen. And the higher the frequency, the larger that word appears on the screen. So we're certainly seeing people responding in terms of the industry, which is lovely. Sustainable is very much at the fore of the entries that you are making to describe this industry. Let's take a few more moments to keep capturing those descriptives, and then we'll lock it down and have a look at what we have landed with. Okay, I think we'll give it just a few more moments and then we'll lock it down. Sustainable is certainly still leading as one of the most frequently listed descriptors. Employment has now started to come up as well, as has accessible and strong. I'm now going to lock down I've now locked down that question. So what we can do now is have a look at what we have entered. Certainly through that activity, the descriptors of sustainable and accessible have really come to the fore. Employment is a very high frequency theme in how you are describing your industry of 2030. We're also seeing regional coming up as a really strong descriptor, and authentic is something else that we're seeing there coming up quite strongly. We can see throughout there elements of skills to accompany employment and the people that would be part of that industry. So there we have a snapshot of those key descriptors for the successful industry that we aspire to have for 2030. I'm now going to take us back to have a look at our second question. This question is, what is the one critical factor that you believe will underpin the success of 2030? So what we need now is to have you think about what is the critical factor. You've thought about what that industry would look like and how you would characterize it. What is that critical factor that will enable us to achieve that aspiration? I invite you to go back to the Poll Everywhere interface And I'm now activating our second question. So what we should see here now are the words that you're the words that you're entering as the critical factors to underpin the success of the industry of 2030. So what you're seeing on the screen now is a wall of words, a wall of critical factors that for you are important to ensure the successful tourism industry of 2030. Let's take a look at what's coming through there. We're seeing innovation, we're seeing capacity building. I can see collaboration and cooperation coming through loud and clear. We can see a need there for innovation. Technology is definitely getting a run for its money, and sustainability is coming up yet again, not as a descriptor, but as that critical factor. We're seeing regional and remote communities and regional tourism as being a really important part of that future industry. I'm going to give you a few more minutes now, a few moments to enter in your final critical factors. And then we'll lock this down and take a slightly different view. Okay, let's lock that down. So as we can see there, again, collaboration has really come to the fore. We saw technology early on, but of course data is another critical factor that's coming through. Connectivity, as I mentioned earlier, is really important for us as such a diverse and geographically disparate nation. We're seeing elements there reflecting on investment and funding. We're seeing critical factors here around product, marketing, and where those markets are. So a lovely range there and across quite a number of themes of what those critical factors could be. I'm now going to move us on to our next area of focus, and that is around opportunities and challenges. We have just spent time thinking about the future and what that could look like and what would be underpinning that future. But if we think about the journey from here to there, we'd now like you to reflect on what opportunities and challenges you foresee may be presented in that journey. So give it a moment to think about that, both challenges and opportunities that you foresee along the way to that successful industry of 2030. I invite you again to go to your Poll Everywhere entry screen. And this time, I'm going to ask you to focus on challenges. We're going to enter them separately. So if you've thought about some opportunities, we'll get to capture them in just a moment. But challenges, what are the challenges that you believe we will see and need to address along the way? Now, I understand that there might be quite a lot of these thoughts and ideas coming through for you. Please keep typing away. You can enter as many as you like in this activity. When we do this activity in a workshop environment, we actually have people write these thoughts onto post-it notes. So as you're looking at this wall of words that are being displayed as you enter those challenges, think of those, if you like, as post-it notes, those ideas, those things that come to mind that you jot down. These are those challenges, those things we need to put on the list to think about how we will address those if, when, or as they arise. I'm going to give you a number of moments to enter your thoughts here. So keep on going. We'll probably give it about a minute. I'm going to scroll through what you're entering slowly so that you can have a look and see what your colleagues are contributing as well. As you're entering these, let me share with you how we will be taking and using the information you're providing. We will be putting together a report on this webinar, just as we have with the workshops that we've held previously face-to-face around the country. So each of these entries, each of these post-it notes that you're putting into this activity will be reported on in the webinar report. So please know that these are being captured and will be part of the contribution and input to the strategy development. We are getting a lot of these coming up now, which is wonderful. Thank you all so much for entering and sharing your challenges. I'm going to lock it down in a few moments. So maybe just type in and finish up your last entry. Okay, I'm going to lock that down now. So as I scrolled, you could see quite a diverse set of challenges there. We can see things in regards to skilled labour. We've seen airport capacity and air access coming up quite a bit. Transport and accessibility certainly coming through as strong themes. We've seen cultural heritage and Indigenous tourism come through. Staff and skills are very much coming through as we look at what's coming on our word wall. Sustainability and the need for being part of a global economy are also coming through as themes. Let's take a slightly different view of this information. Let's have a look at it as a word cloud. This will allow us to see where we have higher frequency usage of words in what we've entered. It's the same information, the same words and sentences and data that you've input, but allows us to look at it slightly differently. So here, what we're seeing as having quite high frequency is climate change and regional tourism. Now, I have put those two together. They could indeed be separate, but they're coming through very, very strongly. The other word that is really strongly coming out of that word cloud is the word lack. And if I reflect on that from the face-to-face workshops that we have conducted over the last month or so, in the challenges that people foresee, the lack of has been a fairly common theme across a number of areas. So here we may see this as lack of funding or lack of access or lack of infrastructure when we look at some of those other larger and more represented frequency words in this word cloud. Thank you very much for entering and sharing those challenges with us. What I would like to do now is cast your minds to the opportunities. We've explored the challenges, and they are challenges to overcome. Now, let's enter the opportunities. What can we do more of? What can we expand? What can we exploit? What can we do that is new? So that we can see these as they come through, I am going to put them back onto words. And when we finish, we'll go through and have a look at it again from a frequency perspective. So let's have a look at what's coming through from everybody on the call. The words being used to describe the opportunities that exist in the journey from here to 2030. I feel I should reflect on the speed at which these are coming through. I think that indicates that whilst we know there are challenges, as there always are, that there is certainly top of mind and right at your fingertips that knowledge and passion for what the opportunities are that are presented right now and into that journey from here to 2030. I'm seeing a few themes coming through here already. Certainly, we're seeing the opportunity presented from the digital advancements, from technology, and from data, all of which are quite related, but in themselves can provide us with very different and expansive opportunities. I've noticed the word voluntourism coming through a number of times. And that indeed is a great opportunity that we can look at within our market. I've seen someone indicate there some examples of other markets that we could perhaps look to for for places where volunteerism and other types of product have been successful. I'll give everyone just a few more moments to type in your last one or two opportunities that you would like to capture here. Okay. please finish typing in your last thoughts here, and we'll lock this down and have a look at those opportunities. Okay, I'm going to go to the top and let's scroll down and have a look at what your colleagues have entered through this activity. So in terms of opportunities, we're certainly seeing again the opportunity for workforce development, for investment. Ecotourism has certainly been seen here a number of times, so you'll see that, I think, as a theme as we scroll through. Looking at new markets and different demographics are also opportunities that you're identifying. There's been references here to baby boomers, to grey nomads, to different markets like India and South America and Africa. As I mentioned before, digital technology and data are certainly opportunities. The concept of experiences as products is also coming through. And similarly to our challenges, our critical factors, collaboration, cooperation and partnerships are also what we're seeing here as opportunities. Similarly to our challenges, let's have a little look at this data slightly differently. Again, looking at the word cloud to get a view of the frequency. What's coming up most frequently for us in the words that we've used to describe our opportunities? Now here we see data, technology, research, education, digital, all coming up quite strongly as terms that you have used to articulate the opportunities that you see. Ecotourism, experiences, and indeed Aboriginal and Indigenous opportunities. Now, I'm going to move us on to our next activity. Now, in this activity, you'll have the opportunity to think about some focus areas and to indicate to us the priorities that you think should be assigned to these focus areas. On the screen now are a list of focus areas or priority areas that's been gleaned from numerous white papers and documents that have been produced from the industry, from industry organisations and bodies over the last 12 to 18 months. So giving us a view to what some of those quite current and recent priority and focus areas are. So what we are going to ask you to do is to prioritise those, to give us an indication of which of these you believe are the top 5 that should be focused on. Now we know there'll be quite a diversity of thought here. And what we'll be able to do as we look at the activity in Poll Everywhere is to be able to see how everyone is voting together and where each of these focus areas is coming in our voting ranking. Let me move to the screen, and now you should see active on your Poll Everywhere the focus areas for you to be able to vote. Now this question will allow you to enter 5 votes. If you change your mind, that's okay. In Poll Everywhere, you'll be able to click the button that says Clear Last Response. So you can click and clear all 5, or you can clear just the last 1 or 2, that's up to you. But if you would like to change your vote, you can until we lock it down. Please note, it will tell you when you've entered 5, and it won't allow you to enter any more at that point. I'll pause for a moment to let you all have a think and place your votes. So what we can see emerging is a strong priority and preference for sustainability. It's been sitting quite strongly there as our front runner for some time, but it's not over yet. Let's see how we go. We're seeing a close second, a fight for second, if you like, between focusing on the customer experience and regional dispersal. Investment in infrastructure and accessibility are both coming in quite tightly at third. I can see it slowing down a little. So it looks like most of you have been able to place most or all of your 5 votes so far. So I'm going to give it just a few more moments before we lock it down and then have a look at where your priorities have landed. Okay, I'm going to lock that down now. And let's have a look at what we have. So not a lot of change from our initial indication of priority. Here we have sustainability coming out very strongly as our top priority, followed by regional dispersal and the customer experience. We then have investment in infrastructure and accessibility coming in very closely. And of course, they're very closely aligned to each other. Labour, from a training and supply perspective, is coming in as our 4th. And then as our 5th is international visitors. So looking at those markets those international markets as being our 5th highest priority. The rest are fairly close together and spread out, but certainly quite a bit of strength there in that sustainability. And if we cast our minds back to our initial word cloud, where you were articulating the characteristics of that successful industry of 2030, sustainability was our largest, most frequently used word in those descriptions as well. So I'm now going to move us to our final activity. As I charged you with at the beginning of our session, the game changer is that thing, that one thing, that silver bullet that might make all the difference to the success of the industry. And hopefully over the last 45 minutes, you've been thinking about that and allowing your brain to mull over what that might be. So in our final activity, I'm going to ask you to enter what you believe is the most important game changer for the industry to drive success to 2030. I'm going to move us to the Poll Everywhere entry. So I invite you to move back to your Poll Everywhere screen. And it is now activated for you to be able to enter your one game changer. Please note that in this activity, it will restrict you to one entry. Now these will scroll across the screen, up the screen as you enter them. So you can watch what your colleagues are entering as you're putting in your own. Already we're seeing some commonality there around focus on international markets, China in particular. We've seen data, we've seen technology a number of times. Collaboration is a word that we've seen emerge in a number of the activities today, and investment is definitely one of those as well. So these are some fabulous expressions of game changers and are aligned very much to some of those priority areas where you are providing that focus on sustainability, infrastructure, and accessibility. I'll pause to allow you to read these as they come through. We have just under 100 people on the call today, so we'll have some fantastic game changers to be having a look at as they scroll through. I like that, Queensland. You're looking for another opera house or something of that ilk for Queensland. If anybody has any other suggestions for any other states, it'd be great to see those. We're seeing here the Federal Minister and Department of Tourism industry focus, and indeed, as Lynn has mentioned in her opening comments, we have certainly got some commitment and focus from our ministers in this process. Certainly some strong themes here and the game changes around the development of skills and around the people themselves that actually make up the industry, and that those people are indeed quite diverse and require and bring with them diverse skills, talents, and capabilities. I'm going to give this just another few moments to ensure that everybody has had the opportunity to enter their game changer. If yours hasn't scrolled on the screen as yet, that's okay. Once you have pressed submit, it is captured and it is included as your contribution in this activity. Okay, I'm going to lock down that question now. Here we go. And we can see those last few that will scroll through now. So thank you all very much for sharing those game changers with us. Indeed, there is, as I said, a lot of variety, but also a lot of consistency through those elements that you've expressed here as game changers, but also as critical factors that we talked about earlier in the session for that success of the industry. I'm now going to hand over the microphone back to Lynn Ashpole from Austrade to express some final closing comments to the session and to express for you what the next steps are. Before I do that, I would like to just thank you all very much for your participation in the webinar today. Thank you. It's been really wonderful to see such passionate entry, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the next steps, as Lynn will articulate.
Thank you very much, Raquel, and thank you very much to everybody online for your time today and for generously sharing your insights and making your contributions. It's really appreciated, and I think we got some fantastic responses today and some fantastic ideas that we'll be able to look at as part of the next steps and developing up the strategy. A recording of today's webinar is going to be available on the Austrade website shortly, and I'd encourage you to let other industry colleagues know about that in case they'd like to have a look and see what we talked about today and the sort of ideas that came up. We've also got a survey, a consultation survey that's open at the moment. It's open until the 8th of November, and you can see the link up there on your screens. More simply, if you just Google Tourism 2030, you'll be able to find the page. I'd really encourage you to alert others to the survey. We'd love to hear from as many people around Australia as possible. As Raquel said at the beginning, we've been doing summaries of all of the face-to-face workshops that we've been holding around Australia, and if you'd like to see the sorts of things that have been discussed in those workshops, again, you'll find them on our website. It's been quite interesting. Some you will see very familiar themes that have emerged from those workshops, but I think today we've also got some really good detail from this particular workshop. Now, for timing, the current strategy, Tourism 2020, runs through until December of next year. So the new tourism strategy commences on the 1st of January 2021. Between now and then, we will continue with industry consultations. Importantly, we'll also be developing up the strategy and taking it back to state and territory and federal tourism ministers at their next meeting early in March next year. You can stay updated on the process by visiting our webpage, where you'll find ongoing information about where we're up to. Finally, from me, thanks again for your time and participation today. It's been greatly appreciated. It's really critical that we get input from stakeholders and from the industry. This strategy is only going to succeed if we have buy-in from the Commonwealth and states and territories and the industry. So thank you very much again as we end our webinar.